The second session begins before the events of the first. In the year 1957, in the frozen state of Colorado, we see a little girl named Hope who is living in a camp, or a lodge, between the mountains. Hope sits inside an old phone cabin, making a mysterious call to a number she doesn't recognize. When a voice finally answers on the other end, she discovers that she is speaking to someone who is in a mountain resort called Band Lake. Hope tells him that she saw this number in a strange dream, and that this is why she decided to call it. She then asks him, "Who are you exactly?" But she receives no answer. Here we discover that the phone Hope is using is not an ordinary one, but a magical and mysterious phone, similar to the one we saw at the beginning of the first part inside the kidnapper's basement. But the question now is, who was Hope talking to in that call? To find out, we move to Northford in 1982, 3 years after the events of the first part. We are now in front of the high school where Finney and his sister Gwen study. We see that Finney has grown since the last time we saw him, and he has changed a lot. He has become more violent and harsh. In one scene, he grabs a new student at school and beats him severely until Gwen intervenes and stops him. She asks him why he attacked the student, and he tells her that the boy was mocking him, saying he was weak and that it was impossible for him to be the one who killed the kidnapper, as people believe. So Finney felt forced to hit him. Gwen tries to calm things down and walks with him toward the school. On their way, they run into a classmate named Ernesto, who greets Gwen and arranges to go out with her. It's clear that he likes her. Meanwhile, Finney stands observing silently, with a mix of jealousy and worry in his eyes. That evening, Finney is sitting watching TV when his father Blake enters to check on him. But Finney feels uneasy, so he goes outside to smoke a cigarette, and we learn that he has become addicted to smoking since the kidnapper incident. There, he begins seeing the kidnapper in front of him, a hallucination wearing the same terrifying mask, haunting his mind ever since. Finney killed him. As these images intensify, Gwen suddenly appears, causing everything to vanish and the place to return to calm. Gwen goes to her room and falls asleep, but her strange dreams return once more. She sees a small child in a snowy mountain resort. Yes, the same resort where we saw Hope in the past. She sees the child being murdered, then his body thrown into the water, but the body floats back to the surface of the ice and writes with bloody letters the letter W before sinking again into the depths. Gwen wakes up terrified, unsure whether what she saw was a dream or a warning of what is coming. And later, my friend, we will learn exactly who that child is and why Gwen sees him in her dreams. What matters now is that after waking from her dream, Gwen is still in a state of trance, walking in her sleep. She leaves the house unconsciously. Luckily, Finney sees her, stops her, and brings her back to bed. We discover that she always sleepwalks whenever she has a vision like this. The next day, Gwen goes to school, where Ernesto sits with her and they talk. From their conversation, we learn that Ernesto's brother was one of the kidnapper's victims, and that Gwen was the one who helped the police find him at the time because of a dream she had, exactly like what is happening with her now. After the school day ends, we see Finney on his way home, passing by an abandoned phone booth when he hears the phone ringing inside. The strange thing is that the booth is out of service. Finney realizes that the call is coming from the spirit of one of the children who were killed by the kidnapper. He hesitantly answers, but he tells the spirit that he cannot help, then hangs up and walks away. That night, Gwen falls asleep once again, and another vision comes to her in the same icy resort. She sees another child being murdered, then his body thrown into the frozen waters. And just like in the previous dream, the body floats onto the ice, this time writing the letter B next to the letter W written by the first child, before sinking once more into the depths. Gwen wakes up terrified, her mind foggy, and she begins sleepwalking again, but this time she reaches the kidnapper's old basement. There she finds the mysterious black phone ringing, so she picks it up. On the other end, she hears the voice of her mother. Hope tells her she is speaking from the year 1957 and explains that she saw the number of this phone in a dream and called it, exactly as Gwen just did. She then asks Gwen to come to the mountain resort where she once stayed, because only there will Gwen understand the meaning behind the dreams of the children she keeps seeing. Gwen agrees, but suddenly Finney appears. Behind her, he had followed her after, noticing her disappearance, and tells her that she was sleepwalking again. Gwen apologizes, and the two return home. The next morning, Gwen tells her brother everything she saw in her dream, explaining that she must go to the icy resort to uncover the secret behind the children who are being killed there and whose bodies are thrown into the water. But Finney refuses to accompany her and believes what she says is madness, which angered and saddens her. The following day, Gwen decides to go anyway, taking Ernesto with her. But before they leave, Finney changes his mind at the last moment and decides to join them. He says goodbye to his father Blake, and they head together toward the distant icy resort. On their way, a violent snowstorm strikes, almost destroying them, until a girl who works at the resort named Mustang appears and helps them reach the place safely. When they arrive, they are greeted by the resort leader Mando, who informs them that the strong storm prevented the other children from arriving. Therefore, the only ones in the resort are Finney, Gwen, Ernesto, Mando, Mustang, a woman named Barb, and a man named Kent. All of them work in the resort. Thus, everyone finds themselves trapped inside the resort, surrounded by the raging snowstorm, with no hope of returning to their town. At least not anytime soon. In the present time, while everyone waits for the storm to end, silence falls over the place. Everyone is shocked by the situation, but no one says a word. They all head to their rooms to sleep. And as always, when Gwen falls asleep, her mysterious visions return. This time, she sees a young man who used to live in the same resort, but someone unknown attacks and kills him, then throws his body into the frozen waters. After a few moments, the body floats to the surface of the ice and writes a third letter beside the previous two, W and B, and the new letter is H, forming together WBH. Gwen wakes from the dream terrified, but what is even more horrifying is that when she opens her eyes, she sees in front of her the three spirits she had dreamed of before, approaching her with pale faces. Behind them appears a mysterious man who kills them all in a single instant. Gwen screams at the top of her lungs in fear. At the same time, Finney is standing in front of the phone booth in the resort, the same booth where Hope once contacted her daughter from the past. Suddenly, the phone begins to ring, even though it has been out of service for years. Finney immediately understands that this call is meant for him, so he answers. On the other end, he hears the voice of the grabber, who tells him that he brought him and his sister here to take revenge because Finney killed him earlier. He adds coldly, "The true fear isn't the people, it's the ice." Then the call is cut off. In that moment, the spirits of the three children appear in front of the booth and begin banging violently on the glass, terrifying Finney, who runs quickly toward Gwen, who was screaming in her room. He calms her down and assures her that everything is fine, and the night ends on this unsettling scene. The next morning, Finney, Gwen, and Ernesto head to the resort cafeteria. They have breakfast and settle their nerves. The resort leader, Mando, sits with them and asks why they came here. Gwen tells him that their mother Hope was once a student at the resort, and that they came searching for a mysterious past connected to her. Mando smiles and tells them he knew Hope well and remembers her, and that he is happy to see our children here, welcoming them warmly. He then asks them to call their families in Denver to reassure them, promising they will leave once the storm ends. Finney then asks him whether the resort's phone booth is working. Mando replies that it has been broken for 10 years. At that moment, Finney becomes certain that the calls he received came from the other side, and that the caller from yesterday was none other than the grabber himself. Finney rushes out of the cafeteria and goes back to the booth, where he receives another call from the three children Gwen had seen in her dreams. He asks them who killed them. Was it the grabber? But they do not know. Their voices fade gradually, and Finney hangs up after realizing he will get no answers. That night, Finney returns to the booth once more, and he receives a new call from the grabber, who tells him this time with a tone full of spite, "I won't kill you. I'll kill your sister Gwen, to break your heart the same way you broke mine when you killed my brother." Meanwhile, Gwen is sleepwalking as usual, finding herself in the middle of the resort. She sees the children whose spirits always appear in her visions, but this time she feels a terror unlike anything before. as the grabber himself appears, the one only she can see, and begins assaulting her violently, beating her and throwing her to the ground. The resort workers witness the scene from afar. They see Gwen being hit and dragged by an invisible force, with no idea what is happening. Fear overtakes them, and no one dares to intervene. And after long, heavy moments, everything suddenly stops. Everyone then gathers in the resort hall. Finney, Gwen, Ernesto, Mando, Mustang, Barb, and Kent, to try to understand what happened. Finney speaks first, telling them that he was kidnapped by the grabber 3 years ago, but managed to kill him and escape. He explains that the grabber brought them here to kill them all, using the spirits of the children he previously murdered in the resort, allowing him to haunt them and control the place. Mando asks hesitantly, does this mean the grabber was once a member of this resort? Finney answers firmly, yes, most likely he was here. He killed the 3 children and then escaped to Denver to continue his crimes there. As we saw before, a heavy silence fills the hall, everyone realizing that the ice surrounding them hides far more than it reveals. Mando then explains that indeed, years ago, 3 children disappeared from the resort under mysterious circumstances, and their fate was never known. But now, after everything Finney and Gwen have told him, he understands the painful truth. They were killed by the grabber himself, back when he lived among them in the resort. Mando pulls out an old photo album of the resort members from that time and hands it to Finney, asking if he recognizes anyone. Finney flips through the photos slowly until his eyes land on a familiar face. He points at it immediately and says, him. That's the grabber. Mando looks at the photo in shock, then reads the name written beneath it, Wild Bill Hickok. At that moment, Gwen realizes the full truth. The 3 letters she kept seeing in her dreams, W, B, and H, were not random symbols at all, but the initials of the grabber's name, W for Wild, B for Bill, and H for Hickok. Gwen takes a deep breath and says in a faint voice, the children weren't trying to scare me. They were trying to tell me that the one who killed them was Wild Bill Hickok, and that we need to find their bodies and bury them properly, so their spirits can rest. Mando is deeply moved, and he promises Gwen, Finney, and Ernesto that he will not leave them alone, that everyone in the resort will help them find the bodies of the 3 children and bury them with dignity, and then they will unite together to put an end to the grabber's spirit forever. The next day, Finney, Ernesto, Mando, and Gwen head out into the dense snow, searching for the children's burial sites. But they find nothing, as if the earth had swallowed them whole. Everyone returns to the resort exhausted, deciding to rest until morning. That night, Gwen falls asleep and sees a new vision. This time, the grabber himself appears. He tells her in a faint, cold voice that he will show her something she must know. Suddenly, the scene in the dream shifts, and Gwen finds herself watching what happened many years ago. She sees her mother, Hope, dreaming of the first young man the grabber kidnapped in the city of Denver. Hope possessed the ability to foresee danger through her visions. When she saw the grabber's face in her dream, she understood who he was and decided to confront him. But she had no idea that this confrontation would be her last. Gwen witnesses the grabber entering their home, kidnapping her mother, and then killing her inside the storage room in their house, afterwards staging the scene to make it appear as though she had taken her own life. For years, Finney, Gwen, and their father Blake believed that Hope had ended her own life, when in truth, she was a victim of the grabber, just as she was about to expose his identity to the police. After Gwen sees everything in her final dream, the grabber appears before her face to face, and a violent battle begins between them. They fight fiercely in a world that seems real, but it soon becomes clear that everything is happening in the realm of imagination, inside Gwen's mind alone, for the grabber has no physical existence, and no one but her can see or touch him. Gwen fights bravely until she eventually overcomes him and destroys him within this illusory world. When she wakes, she returns to reality, breathing heavily. She looks around and finds her brother, Finney, and their father, Blake, have reached the resort after making their way through the storm to save her. Blake asks his children to return home with him immediately, but Gwen refuses to leave and tells them the truth she has learned, that the grabber killed her mother, Hope, because she was about to expose him, and that she will not leave until she retrieves the bodies of the 3 children, buries them properly, and ends the grabber's spirit once and for all. Everyone is moved by her determined words, and they decide to stay with her and help. Finney, Gwen, Blake, and their companions head back into the snow and begin searching for the children's bodies until they finally find them inside, barrels buried beneath the ice. They descend to retrieve them, but at that moment the grabber appears once more, furious and ready for revenge. As before, no one can see him except Gwen, who alone can face him. The final battle begins. Gwen confronts him with all her strength, while Finney tries to help her, even though he cannot see him, striking at the air around him, driven by the desire to protect her. The siblings unite against the nightmare until they finally manage to bring him down. Gwen grabs something sharp and strikes him in the head with a fatal blow, ending his existence forever. She and Finney then throw his body into the frozen waters, trapping his spirit there so it can never harm anyone again. Afterward, they pull the bodies of the 3 children from the ice and bury them in a place worthy of them, in a solemn silence where sorrow and relief blend together. Their souls are finally free. As everyone prepares to leave, they hear the phone ringing in the old cabin, the magic phone. Gwen approaches slowly and answers, only to hear the voice she had longed for all these years. The voice of her mother, Hope. She thanks her for her courage and for what she has done, for her and for the children, telling her how much she loves her and how proud she is of her. Tears mix with a calm smile on Gwen's face as she says her farewell for the last time and gently hangs up. She steps out of the cabin with steady footsteps, her face bathed in the glow of the falling snow. The nightmare has finally ended, and peace has returned to all their spirits. And here the summary ends. If you need to see the first session, tell me in the comments.